Well, I did bring a PowerPoint because if I don't do that, I don't stay on topic. And so this is our talk this morning, Pure and Undefiled Religion, a practical look at loving the least of these. Before we get started with that, I realize that I've kind of set this really high bar of bringing spectacular photos for you guys. And I didn't want to let you down, and so I did bring a photo this morning. It's incredible, absolutely incredible. And those of you who know me know that I love astronomy, and when we think of astronomy, we think of stars. And so I found this picture on the internet. It's 4 stars in a row. I could stand up here and talk about it all day, but it just wouldn't do it justice. So if we can go to the next slide, right there. Right there. That's for you, Elaine, because I knew you wanted to see those 4 stars. All stars, in fact. Yeah, those. Thank you. That's all I have. That's the whole message right there. I'd like to enter into a covenant with you guys this morning. If you will stay engaged with me, I won't sing or talk about feces. Can we do that? All right. All right. So, in serious now. We're going to be talking about a couple of issues that are really important. In some respects are talked about, but in a lot of other respects aren't talked about and really aren't understood all that well. And I want to kind of shed some light on some of those things this morning. And so to do that, I'm going to start by explaining a little bit about what I do. I work for the Missouri Baptist Children's Home. Anybody familiar with the Children's Home? All right, there's like 7 of you. That's good. It's nice to come into the Baptist church and have that many people know about the Baptist Children's Home. So I do family foster care. My job title is I'm the lead family foster care specialist in the Joplin office. And so we work with families as a part of our community-based resource program. And so I work with kids in foster care. So these are kids who are out of home. They're not living at home with their parents because it's not healthy or safe for them to be at home right now for whatever the reason is. And so that's the population that I work with. And so what we try to do is provide services into the home that can rectify the safety issues so that children can go back home. Because that's what we want to do is send kids home because there's no one better to raise a child than that child's parents, unless there's an extenuating circumstance. And so that's what I do, just real briefly. And so continuing on, we can go to the next slide. I'd love to leave that up there all day for you guys, but we'll go on. When I was in college, and yes, I did go to college, I even graduated a couple times. I didn't learn anything, but I got a book, so I thought that was pretty good. This is a book. It's called How the Other Half Lives. Has anybody ever read this book or familiar with this book? Of course, Dan was going to be. Had to know that. Well, How the Other Half Lives, Studies Among the Tenements of New York, is a book written by Jacob A. Riis. And Jacob Riis was an immigrant from Denmark, somewhere. I think Denmark. It doesn't matter. He was an immigrant. He came to the United States in about 1870. He spent the first 3 years that he was in the United States really struggling to find work. During that time, he became familiar with the population that lived in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, which was a rough part of town. And so he struggled to find work. He eventually found a job as a reporter for a newspaper. He eventually bought that newspaper with a $75 down payment, bought the entire paper for $675. Less than a year later, he sold it for 5 times what he paid for it. And so he then continued to work in the news business and became fairly affluent. And so with that, he learned photography, taught himself photography, which, Dan, as you can attest, 1870, those things weren't cheap. I mean, that was expensive, right? So, old joke. Yeah, you're welcome. I didn't say I wouldn't make fun of Dan's age today, all right? So that wasn't part of the bargain. So he writes this book, and in the book are quite a few pictures just of tenement living, which, if you know anything about American history, was not all that good. And so in 1890, his book is published, and he's trying to tackle this issue of the tenement housing because there's a population that a lot of people just aren't that familiar with. They just don't know what's going on in the Lower East Side. of Manhattan, and it's nothing good. In fact, on page 65 of the book, there's this quote: "The death of a child in a tenement was registered at the Bureau of Vital Statistics as, quote, plainly due to suffocation in the foul air of an unventilated apartment," end quote. And so that's just a little picture of what life was like for these individuals who were living in these really, really terrible situations. And so he wanted to shed light on this subject, wanted to try and bring aid to this group of people that was really underserved, if served at all. And so he writes this book, and it makes a difference. There are a lot of people who are involved in government, who are just wealthy people, who begin to read this book and see these pictures and realize this isn't very good, this can't continue to go on the way it's going. And so over time, change did occur, and the tenement housing isn't really a thing anymore. And so in the same way that Jacob Riis's book impacted New York City in the 1890s, I am hopeful that the talk this morning will impact the people inside the church, to the plight of underserved population that is in desperate need of help. And so if we can go to the next slide. There are two things that we want to talk about today. The first is human trafficking, and then the second is foster care, and we'll get into that in a little bit second. And so this, when we talk about James 1:27, is our, I guess, key scripture for this morning. So if you want to turn there, you can. I'm going to read James 1:27. It says, "Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world." And when I say the word orphans, I picked this picture because I think it's fairly appropriate to what our concept tends to be when we hear the word orphans, because we tend to think of kids who are somewhere else, who are living in some other continent, some other country, some faraway land, and it's very sad, and we want to help them, but they're so far away, what could we possibly do? And so this morning, I don't intend to change that, because that is true. I intend to add to your concept of orphan. And so when we talk about orphans in the future, hopefully this isn't the only thing you think of. All right, so we can go to the next slide. All right, so we're going to talk about human trafficking. You probably, when I say human trafficking, have something that comes into your mind that you're thinking of, probably involving the Super Bowl and stuff you've seen and heard on TV, and some of those things are accurate, some of them may not be completely accurate. And so I thought it might be helpful to define human trafficking. And so it says, the illegal movement of people, typically for the purposes of forced labor or commercial sexual exploitation. All right, so when we say human trafficking, we're talking about those things. I brought some statistics, so if we can go to the next page. Oh, excuse me. See, this is why we have the PowerPoint, because I wouldn't be able to stay on track without it. We have some myths about human trafficking. And so the first myth is that trafficked persons can only be foreign nationals or are only immigrants from other countries, and that's just not quite true. The truth is that human trafficking within the United States affects victims who are U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, visa holders, and undocumented workers. So however you're in this country, you can be affected by this, because it has affected people of all different types. The second myth is that human trafficking is essentially a crime that must involve some form of travel, transportation, or movement across state or national borders. And the reality is that trafficking does not require transportation. Transportation may be involved as a control mechanism to keep victims in unfamiliar places, but it's not a required element of the trafficking definition. And so that brings us right into the next myth, which is that human trafficking is just another term for human smuggling. And again, this is not true, because smuggling is a crime against a country's borders, and trafficking is a crime against a person. Our next myth is that sex trafficking is the only form of human trafficking, and that's just not true, although when we talk about human trafficking, that's probably the first thing that we tend to think of. But the federal definition of human trafficking encompasses both sex trafficking and labor trafficking, and the crime can affect men and women, children, and adults. Our next myth is that victims of human trafficking often do not immediately seek help or self-identify as victims of a crime due to The myth is that victims of human trafficking will immediately ask for help or assistance and will self-identify as a victim of a crime. And the reality is that that's not true. Victims of human trafficking often do not immediately seek help or self-identify as victims of a crime due to a variety of factors, including lack of trust, self-blame, specific instructions by the traffickers regarding how to behave when talking to law enforcement or social services. And the last myth is that human trafficking only occurs in illegal underground industries. And this is not true either, because trafficking can occur in legal and legitimate business settings, as well as underground markets. It's been reported in business markets, such as restaurants, hotels, and manufacturing plants, as well as underground markets, such as commercial sex and residential brothels and street-based commercial sex. Okay. So when we talk about human trafficking, we're talking about that. And so now I have some statistics. Yeah, all right. So in 2014, the National Human Trafficking Resource Center hotline, which is operated by Polaris, received reports of 3,598 sex trafficking cases inside the United States. That's almost 10 cases a day. I want to be clear about this information. This is just sex trafficking cases. The hotline received over 21,000 phone calls reporting suspected trafficking. And 3,000, almost 3,600 of them were sex trafficking cases. Also in 2014, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimated that 1 in 6 endangered runaways reported to them were likely sex trafficking victims. That means that if I had 6 of you stand up and you all represented someone who had run away from home, one of you is a victim of sex trafficking. Of that 1 of 6, 68% of you were in the care of social services when you ran away from home. That statistic really hits me right here because of what I do. And I have seen kids that have run, and it's just not a good situation at all. So that's the tip of the iceberg with human trafficking, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it as we move forward here this morning, but I want to switch gears to foster care. And so when I talk about foster care, I want to ask the question, what is foster care? Does anybody know what foster care is? Anybody brave enough to venture a guess? All right, we'll go to the next slide and I'll define it for you. Foster care, the foster care system is a temporary arrangement in which adults provide for the care of a child or children whose birth parent is unable to care for them. Foster care is not where juvenile delinquents go. It is where children go when their parents cannot, for a variety of reasons, care for them. This is an important thing to stress because I know for me, before I started doing this work, when I thought of foster care, because my aunt works for the children's home, so I was somewhat familiar with it, and it was just like, well, they were all bad kids, you know, so that's what you do with bad kids. They go to foster care, but that's not the truth at all. Kids that are in foster care are there because, for whatever reason, they can't be with their parents right now. And so I want to clear up that misconception. Okay. All right, if we can go to the next slide. We'll talk about some statistics on foster care. And this information comes from a report called the AFCARS report, which you can get. It's from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth and Families, Children's Bureau. So you just write all that down and go back and look it up. But they put out this report every year, and it's really slow coming out because these are the most recent statistics that I could find, and they're from 2013. And if you know about the year now, it's 2015. But in 2013, there were 402,000, a little over 402,000 children that were in foster care nationally. That's our 50 states. Almost 255,000 of them entered care that year, so entered care in 2013. 101,800 were waiting to be adopted. The average age of a foster child is 8.2 years old. Is there anybody in here who's 8? Okay, my daughter is 7. So if you guys know Katie, just a little bit older than that is the average age of a foster child. The average time that a child spends in care is 13.5 months. And the average time in care for a child waiting to be adopted is 25 months. It's just a little over 2 years. We can go to the next slide. That's a national problem. I think we could all agree that doesn't sound good. But hey, we live in Missouri and we don't have that problem. Well, not quite. Because of the nature of what I do, I have access on occasion to more recent information, and so on August 14th we had a meeting with Children's Division, and some of these statistics were shared there, and I copied them down so that I could bring them to you. As of August 14th of this year, there were approximately 13,000 kids who were in state's custody. That's in Missouri. Approximately 3,500 of those are in the Southwest region. The Southwest region includes the counties of Camden, Laclede, Miller, Montague, Morgan, Bates, Henry, St. Clair, Barton, Cedar, Dade, Vernon, Dallas, Hickory, Polk, Webster, Greene, Christian, Taney, Berry, Lawrence, Stone, Douglas, Ozark, Wright, and then Jasper, Newton, and McDonald. Approximately 1,000 kids are in care in the 29th and 40th Judicial Circuits, which are Jasper County and Newton and McDonald County. So there's about 600 that are in care in Jasper and about 400 that are in care in Newton and McDonald counties. That's in your backyard. The kids in care in Jasper, the vast majority of them come from Joplin and Carthage. Kids in care in Newton and McDonald County, well, McDonald County, they could come from nowhere because there's not any towns down there. But the kids in Newton County, the majority of them come from Neosho, Goodman, and not Anderson. That's McDonald County. So that's where they come from. So we can go to the next slide. And I want to talk about Jasper County because this is where most of us live, and it's certainly where we're at church right now. Approximately 40% of all current cases in Jasper County are meth-related. That's not drug-related, that's just meth-related. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, methamphetamine is a powerful, highly addictive stimulant that affects the central nervous systems. That's what methamphetamine is, highly addictive. Its use or abuse differs greatly across various regions. We happen to live in a region where it is really, really badly abused, very prevalent. The average age of meth users in 2012 was 19.7 years old. And many of them are either chronic abusers or they're involved with manufacturing, distribution, or selling of the drug. And that is very accurate with what I experience on a day-to-day basis. Only about 10 to 15% of the cases in Jasper County are sexual or physical abuse. And that was a little bit surprising because I think we tend to think of kids who are in care that they're in care simply because they were either sexually or physically abused. That they were beaten and not fed and whatever else. But that's such a small percentage of the cases that we see. 85 to 90% of the cases that are open currently in Jasper County are tied to mental health issues or substance abuse issues. And by that I mean depression leads to a lack of supervision or inadequate shelter or unsanitary living conditions. And so these are people who have some sort of underlying mental problem that isn't taken care of, and it leads to their children coming into care. That hurts me here because those are problems that could be addressed before kids had to come into care. It's a really traumatic experience for a child to be removed from their parents, even in the worst situations. And I've seen some really bad situations. All of those kids want to go home. They all love their parents. And to know that there's a percentage of them that's this high that could be prevented if we had better services in place beforehand is difficult for me. So that's the problem. I think we can all agree that it's a problem. Yes? All right. So what's being done about the problem? So who fights for these kids? And so the Missouri Children's Division is the primary agency that fights for them. A portion of the services, though, are privatized, and so the Missouri Alliance for Children and Families holds that contract, and they partner with some other agencies, including Great Circle, Presbyterian Children's Home and Services, Cornerstones of Care, and the Missouri Baptist Children's Home. I'm going to talk to you today about the Missouri Baptist Children's Home because that's where I work. It's the one I know the most about and the one I have the best access to. And so if we can go to the next slide. When I talk about the Missouri Baptist Children's Home, this is what I'm talking about. We're the only Baptist organization providing case management services to Missouri children in foster care. The home itself was founded upon a dream of Mrs. Joseph B. Thompson in 1882. This book was published in 1890. So while this stuff is going on in New York City, there's a gal in Missouri who is concerned for children who don't have parents. And so she saw a vital need in the rapidly developing city of St. Louis for a place to house orphan children and infants when they had no place to go. After 3 long years of struggle with finances, leadership roles, and overall interest in the project, the Baptist Orphans Home opened its doors to 5 orphans on April 1st, 1886. And that's where we got our start. We can go to the next slide. The Children's Home has grown and developed its services to meet changing societal conditions because there's not orphanages in the United States anymore. New programs have been created, and the home has grown from the single campus in suburban St. Louis to locations across the state of Missouri. In addition to the main campus located in Bridgeton, which is up near St. Louis, the Children's Home now provides services at the Byrne campus in Peculiar, which is near Kansas City, the Hutchins campus in Mount Vernon, which is near nowhere, the Dalton campus in Lamar, and the McMichael campus in East Prairie, also near nowhere. The home is licensed to house 154 children across the state at any one time. All right, next slide. In total, though, the Children's Home provides services for more than 6,500 children, youth, and families every single year. Although the name has changed to the Missouri Baptist Children's Home, the programs have changed and expanded to fit changing times and situations. The organization continues to base its motivation on Mrs. Thompson's dream, providing a caring and loving place for children in need. The mission of the Missouri Baptist Children's Home, and I can tell you we know this because we get to recite it at every quarterly staff meeting, is how we end all of our meetings. The Missouri Baptist Children's Home is committed to serving God by responding to the needs of children, youth, and families to make a lasting difference in their lives. That's what we're about. That's what we want to do. With that mission, we have several values, and I'm only going to talk about one of them today because I think it's the most important one for what we're doing here, and it resonates with me the most. The goal of the services provided by Missouri Baptist Children's Home is to create the opportunity for each client to achieve his or her potential while moving from an external to an internal locus of control, thus becoming self-sufficient, functional members of society. As a Christian agency, Missouri Baptist Children's Home supports the belief that no person can achieve his or her potential or function at his or her best without a personal relationship with Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord. And the reason that I want to talk about this, sorry, we can stay on that slide. Back one. The reason I want to talk about this is this phrase right here, while moving from an external to an internal locus of control, thus becoming self-sufficient, functional members of society. This resonates with me as it does when we talk about watered gardens, because this is what they talk about as well. We don't want to continue to encourage people to live in bondage to their situation and bondage to where they find themselves. We want to empower people to have a better life and to do so on their own. And the way that we do that is by connecting people to resources that are within their community and that are within their own family structure to try and move them from a place of entitlement to a place of empowerment. And that's what we really try to do with all of our services. Okay, so now we can go on. So we have 2 different types of services that we offer. We offer residential services and we offer community-based services. The residential services are probably what you think of when you think of the Missouri Baptist Children's Home, because when I started telling people that I work for the Children's Home, they're like, oh, you go to Mount Vernon. No, actually we have an office here in Joplin. And so the services that are the residential services are these here: therapeutic group homes, transitional living programs, development disabilities program, and the Freedom 4319, which is a human trafficking program. And so just a little bit about each of those. The therapeutic group homes are the residential settings that you are probably somewhat familiar with. Each group home is licensed for children ages 6 to 21, and each home can house 8 children. In addition to the basic necessities of food, clothing, shelter, and medical care, the kids also receive individual, family, and group counseling, education, a structured environment, and therapeutic recreation. The goal of therapeutic group homes is the reunification of each child with their biological family, if that's possible, or the development of an alternative family structure when necessary. Therapeutic group homes are available in Mount Vernon and Peculiar. That's where we have those services at. The transitional living programs provide with different types, I guess, of transitional living. So there's transitional living in a group home, which we have in Mount Vernon. We have a boys' home and a girls' home, and we also have a girls' home in St. Louis. And so those transitional living services are kids who have been identified as they're unlikely to be going home, as in they're not going to be going home. And we're going to have to teach them how to be self-sufficient adults. And so they have the opportunity to enter into this transitional living program. We're not the only agency in the state who offers it. There are several others, but I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about us, because I'm selfish. And so what this program does, it's designed to equip older youth with the skills they need to successfully transition from adolescence to young adulthood. So we have those group homes that are located on the campuses, and then we also have scattered site services in Springfield and St. Louis. And so those are more like apartments, less supervision, less structure. A lot of times the kids that are in the scattered sites have come from the group home setting into the scattered site setting, or they're children who are just really great kids and never needed the extra structure of the group home to begin with, but those are a little more rare. The Scattered Site program provides housing with limited supervision, and it trains the youth to utilize public transportation and a wide array of community resources, because again, we don't want people to be dependent upon everyone else for the rest of their life. And that's something that I think causes us as people to shy away from lending a hand. I don't have time to be driving you to this thing all the time, so maybe I'll just stay uninvolved. And that's a process of thinking we have to get out of. And instead of thinking that we would have to do everything, we can give people the tools that they need to be successful on their own. All right. The developmental, sorry, same page, back. Sorry. The Developmental Disabilities Program, this is also close to my heart because before I started at the Children's Home, I worked for Easy Living, which they provide services to adults with developmental disabilities. And so this program is located only in Peculiar at the Byrne campus. The home is called the Country Haven Group Home, provides a safe and secure environment for those individuals and allows them to access the community to find enjoyment and freedom. And the Freedom 4319 program, which is the human trafficking rescue program, it provides a safe and supporting, hopeful environment where women rescued from human trafficking can realize the freedom in Christ to make healthy life choices. This is done by connecting them to a supportive network of church, community, and family, or those who can be like family. The name 4319 is a reference to the scripture from Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, which says, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." There is hope in what we do. We are faced with a tremendous challenge, and not just as an agency of MBCH, but as believers in Christ who are called to love the least of these. We face a tremendous challenge, but there is hope because God is making a way in the wilderness and He's making streams in the wasteland. I told you we'd come back to the human trafficking, and the reason is because I have some information that relates specifically to this program. I happen to know the director of that program quite well, and so I had contacted her, and she gave me this information. The Freedom 4319 house opened the adult unit in December of 2012, and I guess I should specify there is an adult unit and a minor unit. The adult program, which is all she could give me information on, because of the nature of minors. We've served almost 70, so 67 total adults from the ages of 19 to 39 since it opened in December of 2012. These individuals have come from other states like Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Florida, Wisconsin, Tennessee, Illinois, Georgia, California, Nevada, and Virginia. They've come from situations where they were living with their parents. They've come from situations where they were taken from sting operations in hotels, from jail, from emergency shelters, from hospitals. Some of them were homeless. Some of them were runaways, and those who were runaways, many of those were in foster care when they ran. And they've come from drug rehab facilities. These individuals have been referred to this program from the FBI in Missouri and other states, local law enforcement, hospitals, shelters, family members, churches. And so I had asked her some questions. One of the questions was, what causes these women to get into trafficking? Because that seems like a really stupid thing to do, right? I mean, why would you sign up for that knowing beforehand? And so you'd be shocked to find out most of them don't know what's going on. I'm sure you thought the same thing I did. We have met ladies, this is her, so the director. We have met ladies who were lured in via dating websites, approached by women posing as potential friends, and then once a friendship is created, the ladies trust them and are easily persuaded to go places, out of town, etc., where they are then made/forced into sexual activities by the trafficker or pimp. This has happened on college campuses as well. Some ladies expressed being pursued by a nice guy who does a lot of nice things for them and wins their trust. After a few months of being together, the boyfriend starts to ask them to do things for him. One thing leads to another, and they are being sold for money or drugs or whatever else. Because a bond was built first, some of these ladies believe the guy really loves them and he didn't mean to hurt them. We unfortunately see some of these ladies return to the trafficker, Romeo, or pimp, feeling that he is a good guy with bad habits and tendencies. A lot of our ladies have been beaten and hurt so badly, emotionally as much as physically, that they have a hard time believing they deserve better. Some desire better but think the trafficker is more powerful than them and they should return before he catches them and hurts them even worse. The majority of the people we have served in this program have come in for a night or two and then left, and then come back for another night or two and then left, and then maybe they come in for a week or two and then they leave. Truly a sad deal. The average years being trafficked was another question I asked. And so she said the average length of time they have been in trafficking seems to be 6 to 12 months. They've had a few who were trafficked for years. A lot of these ladies were trafficked by boyfriends or introduced to this by close female friends. They typically do not give the full number of years, but only the time frame of which they realized they were no longer doing this for their partner. And so that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, because many of them do not identify as victims. And so most of these people have been in this situation for a period of time before they realize they're in this situation. So the length of time of 6 to 12 months may not be entirely accurate. Many younger ladies express signs of abuse, neglect, and trauma starting from young ages. Several of our ladies were in foster care and were introduced as teenagers after running away from home, not feeling wanted in the home, etc. It's hard to describe an average length of time, she says. Some of the accounts from the ladies would average several years, but they only estimate 8 to 12 months. And we know from research that victims lose a lot of cognitive functioning, and events are often given out of sequence and with little cohesiveness. So it's really difficult to pinpoint an answer on how long these people have been trafficked, because the trauma that they go through is so severe, they have a difficult time being able to recount it. She notes that something that was interesting to her is that a lot of these girls have faith backgrounds, which is a little terrifying as well, being in the church and knowing how little I knew about this subject, and I work at the children's home, and so I can only imagine how much you guys know. We have an issue facing us this morning. There are some success stories, though, and I do want to share some of those with you. One young lady attended college while in the program. Another young lady, after 2 years in the program, graduated from high school. One young lady was reunified with family due to therapy and the family working on their communication within the home. One young lady was able to be reunited with her mother who lived out of state. She was transferred to a job in that state and continues to work and do well. A few ladies have been able to reunite with their mothers, all out-of-state victims who were not previously with family and whose family ties had been distant for years. One young lady lives in Seattle and is currently in a worship band in her church and is helping her local police department find trafficked victims. That's what's being done by the Missouri Baptist Children's Home currently in the Freedom 4319 program. All right, now we can go on. Next slide, please. All right, so the community-based programs then, we get into more of what I'm more familiar with, the family foster care, which is what I do. Under this program, MBCH provides case management services with the goal of finding permanency for children in state custody. Family foster care services are provided through regional offices in St. Louis, Springfield, Joplin, and Kansas City. Okay? So again, that's what I do, and we try to find permanency for children. One thing that I have learned in my 3.5 years of working there, the state is really terrible at raising kids, and we need people to do that. And so we need to find permanency for kids as quickly as we can. All right, that's family foster care. We offer intensive family reunification services in the Joplin office, which is a program that I supervise. And this program is for families who the child has been removed from the home. And if extra supports, extra services were to be put in place, then it may be safe for the child to be returned home. And so we have one specialist who works with up to 3 families at a time, spending approximately 7 hours a week in each home, working with that family on safety concerns, parenting issues, those kinds of things. And so that's one way that we're able to help some families be reunited more quickly. We also have treatment foster care, or TFC, as it's commonly referred to. This program is really a good program. It's designed to serve children and youth who have experienced trauma in their lives due to abuse or neglect, and as a result, have special behavioral, emotional, mental, or physical health needs. TFC is a specialized form of foster care, offering children a step down from residential care, and many times an alternative to residential care. So if you want to think of it in levels, we have like traditional foster care, which would be like where you lived at when you were a kid, even though you may not have been in foster care, you lived in your home, and so it's that level. Then there's a behavioral level for kids who have behavior issues, and so there's another level for that. There's a therapeutic level, which is this program. There's a career level, which is a little bit worse, and then there's residential. And so a lot of these things, if you look at them in a step, we're able to avoid putting some kids in residential because we can get them into therapeutic homes, which is a great thing. Okay. So the TFC, these foster parents go through special training, and they're independent contractors with MBCH, and they receive special training and support to care for these kids. They have a specialist, like me, only a lot nicer, who visits the home on at least a weekly basis, and they provide 24/7 on-call support to those families. We also do family resource development services. These services focus mostly on the licensing and maintaining of foster homes. And so we recruit foster parents, we train them, and we license them and maintain that license. We also Missouri has what's called kinship or relative care. And so for a child who comes into care, because the state believes that family is the best people to raise kids, and they do best when they're as close to home as they can be, there's kinship and relative care. And so we do license families who a child comes into care. We are state mandated. I get to do this on a regular basis. I get to call grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and siblings and find out who's out there that's in your family that would be appropriate to raise this child. And so if we're able to successfully find someone who can fit that bill, then they have to become licensed. And so they go through relative or kinship care, and we maintain those licenses as well through family resource development. The state of Missouri is in the process of trying out privatizing family resource development. And so in the Northwest region, up by Kansas City and all the way up to Iowa, there's a great big area of the state where the entire thing, family resource development, is privatized. And so our agency is a part of that pilot program. If it goes well, in the next several years, it may be that the entire state privatizes, but we're not sure on time frame of that. Okay. We also offer pregnancy services as well as a part of our community-based services. This program provides assistance to minors and adult women with an unplanned pregnancy by helping them explore and choose the best option for themselves and their baby. Abortion is never presented as an option, and no referrals for abortion are given to clients. The options presented to clients are parenting, placement with a relative, or adoption. This program offers an array of services, including prenatal care, medical services, job skills, educational skills, birth classes, counseling and parenting support training. In-home services for clients are provided in the St. Louis region and in southeast Missouri. And MBCH, Children and Family Ministries, offers services without regard to race, color, national origin, age, religion, handicap, gender, and or income. Okay. There's some testimonies here I could read, but I don't want to do that. We've been here long enough already. All right. So we've acknowledged that there's a problem this morning, and that there are things that are being done towards addressing the problem. And the question now becomes, how can you be involved? How can you help? And so the first thing that you can do is you can pray. You can pray for the 30-some-odd kids that are in residential services with the Missouri Baptist Children's Home. You can pray for the 12 kids who are involved in scattered site services, for the 18 kids in the transitional living group homes. You can pray for the 8 adults who are in the developmental disability services. You can pray for the 18 people served in the Freedom 4319 program at one time. Pray for the 80 kids in therapeutic foster homes. You can pray for the 102 kids in foster care in the Joplin office, and hopefully soon that will be 120, and more around the state. You can pray for the 230-plus employees who make it their mission to serve God by responding to the needs of children, youth, and families to make a lasting difference in their lives. You can pray for biological families. You can pray for the parents, that they can address the concerns that need to be addressed, and that they can be there for their children. You can pray for aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas to be able to participate in the well-being of their family members. There are giving opportunities. Our various contracts for the services we provide and the programs that we provide do not pay for themselves. Every year, our annual budget is heavily subsidized by monetary gifts from people and churches all over the state. You can be involved in that. You can become a foster parent. We need good homes who are going to love on kids through the most difficult thing they've ever faced in their entire life. We need families who are willing to take on teenagers. And if you can't be a foster parent, because it's not for everybody, you can support those who are foster parents. There are short-term volunteer opportunities as well. Every year, the Children's Home puts on a camp for the children who are in the residential services and in the therapeutic program. They do that in Mount Vernon at Baptist Hill. Usually it's the first week of August, and we're always short on volunteers. We need people to teach Bible studies. We need people to be group leaders. We need people to help in the kitchen. We need people to just be there and try and help keep kids from beating each other up. So we do that every year. You can teach a Bible study or a life skill on the campus. And if that's something you're interested, come talk to me. I'll hook you up with the right people. You can participate when we do the Christmas gifts for the kids in foster care. At Christmas time, we bring the ornaments up, and you can take an ornament and you can buy a gift. And those ornaments represent real children who have put down a real request. In fact, we're starting that process right now. I've got the forms I've got to take out to the kids on my caseload and share with them. And they're going to write down 3 things that they would like to have for Christmas. And so those requests come in, and we give them out to the churches who are willing to participate. And people like you purchase those items that those kids have requested. And you bring them back to us, and we put them in a bag and give them to the foster parents, and they get to wrap them up and give them to those kids so that they can have Christmas along with everybody else. You can participate in that. There are other volunteer opportunities, and you can think outside the box. If there's something that you're good at, that you have an affinity for, talk to us. Because there are kids who are interested in all the things that you're interested in. And kids who need as many people in this world who will love and care for them as they can find. And as the church, is that not our responsibility? And so today your eyes have been opened to see how the other half lives. The question becomes this morning, what will you do to help?